Okay guys, this is I kind of got roped into this one yesterday. I was out working on some tractors on a large ranch, and one of the foreman's pickups is a '08 Toyota Tundra, and they said it wouldn't start. And their mechanic had looked at it and screwed with it, and he couldn't get anything to happen on it, and they thought there was something wrong with one of the computers or something. So I went over there, and first thing I did was I checked my signal power and everything coming in my relay, and my constant power going in my relay, and everything was there. And I said, well, it should start. You know, it wouldn't crank, it wouldn't turn over. So I pulled the start relay out. On these 5-pin relays, well, this one's a 4-pin, but most of them are 5. So most of them there'll be another pin right here in the middle where my thumb is. There'll be one in the center. It'll be a 5-pin. On these, so what I did is, you're going to have on these two copper-looking pins here, one's going to be constant power, and one's going to be the power out going to the whatever function it's running, which would be the starter. And one of them's going to be a signal from the ignition switch, and one is going to be a ground, so the contact, so it pulls the coil in. So what happens is you're going to have constant power here on this pin, and you're going to have power out. Well, once the signal and the ground are there on this side, once you go to hit the start key, it's going to pull the coil in inside this relay, and then the power out's going to come out of this other pin to go to the starter. Well, I had everything. I had ground, I had signal power, I had constant power. So I thought, well, it's got to be the starter. It has to be. So what I did, I was by myself, and I'll show you kind of what I did. You kind of have to hurry up with this thing and do this. Right now what we'll do is we'll stick a piece of wire. You're by yourself. We're going to show you. I got to pull the starter out of this thing. But if you're out in the middle of nowhere and you can't get this thing started, we'll shove a piece of wire right there. Let me go turn the key on, and we'll shove the other one, because the starter's going to stay engaged for just a minute after you do this. So you got to haul ass back over here and unplug this so you don't keep grinding on the ring gear. I got to start this thing to get it underneath the lift here, because I'm looking at this thing. I've never pulled a starter on one of these, and I'm looking at this thing. It looks like the exhaust. It's in between the exhaust manifold and the block. It looks like the whole exhaust system's got to come out on the right side to get this piece of shit out of here. But go turn your key on, and when those two big copper pins go in, remember that these two here, you just jump across it. Basically, you're going from constant power to pin the power out of the relay going to the starter. So then you'll run over there after you turn your key on. You kind of have to hurry along and do this. Okay, so I've got the jumper wired right now. We should be going to the start position. Where's my punch at? This is where you got to hurry, and you got to run over there and jerk your wires back out of there. You just come in through here. Your starter is way back in here. There you go. Got it started. I got the tire off for ease of access. I mean, most of you guys, if you're out broke down in the middle of nowhere, you're not going to have the tire off of it. But just for video purposes, I showed the tire off. We'll put this relay back in, and we'll start pulling the starter on it. And I'll show you that miserable pain in the butt. Okay, guys, so there's the starter. Way back up in here, if you can see my finger. So I've never done one of these before, so bear with me as I stumble through this. Looks like we got 3 bolts on this exhaust flange. We got an O2 sensor here we need to unhook. We got another O2 sensor here we'll unhook. We got 2 bolts here on this flange, and we'll get this pipe out of there. And then it looks like we got some kind of heat shield that we'll have to let it back down and go through go through this side over here by the inner fender. Pull the heat shield off, and then it looks like you pull exhaust manifold off, and then you pull your starter off. So here we go. I'll start doing the right bank. So I took the upstream O2 sensor there and the downstream O2 sensor out Well, where's the pipe at? Right here. Those are unhooked. This one up front, you gotta reach way up there on top of the transmission to unplug it. Just make sure you're not jerking on the wires. Make sure you're grabbing the plug. You don't want to jerk the wires out of the plug. But so I took these 3 flange bolts off. What I ended up doing, there's a flange bolt back here, comes off the right bank, 2 bolts. These are all 14mm headed bolts. Well, I couldn't get it to come. I couldn't get any slack in this exhaust system with just those 2 unhooked. So I came over here, see where this other side wides into the left bank, and I took these 2 out, and then it popped right out. And I'm just going to leave this thing laying right there where it's at, and then I'm going to let this lift down now and reach into the inner fender and take that heat shield and all that crap off. Here we are with this thing. So there's a heat shield down there. I'll show you here in a little bit. I took the bolts out for that heat shield, but I can't get it off because the dipstick is in the way. So I see a bolt right here we're going to have to pull out. So I'm going to get a wobble and a 6-inch extension on a 1/4-inch drive set. See if I can get that out. And then there's a wire clip right here holding a wiring harness or something to the dipstick tube. And just squeeze the 2 tabs together on that and pop it out of there. So, heat shield. You have 2 bolts here towards the front. I'll show you here a little bit underneath that inner fender. But pop this one out here. This little rubber flap here. You'll have to pop it out. It goes right up here on the back side of the inner fender. It's got these little plastic rivets in it. And then there's this front flap. Just pop the clips off of it. And you can see back in there, I don't know if you can see where that one hole is, but there's another bolt for that heat shield right back up in there. Hard to see it. About right there, maybe you can see it. It's tough to see. You have to get a 6-inch extension and a wobble to get those bolts out on that front one out. It's kind of tough to get out of there. And then just drag that heat shield right out the back. You'll have to bend it a little bit. There's just no way around it. You bend it a little bit and pull it right out. So now, the starter's back in here behind this heat shield here. Now we got to get this exhaust manifold off. It looks like, and let's see what we got to pull off here. This thing's crazy, man. It's looking like these bolts need to come off here. Looks like there's some kind of EGR crossover tube or something right here on the back. Pull these 2 off. Those are all 10mm there. There's a, looks like 12mm here. The actual exhaust flange hooks to that. And yeah, them ones up there behind the axle, that ought to be real fun back in there. What a piece of junk this thing is. And there's going to be a couple back in there. So, I don't know if you can see them. There's one back in there, another flange there. So, all I can say, guys, prepare to lose some skin on your hand, I guess, and just get them off there. And once I get this out, I'll give you a little better idea what I had to pull off. For right now, to be honest with you, I really don't know. I'm kind of winging this right now. I've never done one of these, so be back in a minute, and I'll show you what I had to pull this manifold off. All right, guys. So, okay, the manifold is loose. Okay, so these 2, actually these 3, this one here ain't too bad, 12mm. I used a short socket. I had a short 3/8 drive, 12mm. You just got to do what works best for you. I used a long extension and a 3/8 universal. The one back up in here, way back up in here, I mean, what a bastard. I couldn't get my 3/8 wobble to bend the right way. I had to use a 1/4-inch drive set and about, well, I don't know. I got a 6-inch extension, another 6-inch, and then another 3-inch, and a 12mm to get that one loose. These out here weren't too bad. I didn't really need to take this off. I thought these studs were into the head, but they're actually part of this, whatever the hell this is, hooked to the exhaust manifolds, like a crossover tube going to the EGR or something like that. So we're going to go ahead and lift her the rest of the way up and pull the manifold out, and then we can finally get to what we came here to do, and let's pull the starter out. Of course, I'm doing it with a lift. It's a lot easier with a lift. Okay, so there's the manifold. Let me see here. How hard that can be out now. Well, guys, I'm gonna need two hands to wrestle this thing out here. There's let's see here. Looks like you got 1, 2, 3, 4 bolts holding the starter in. It looks like. Maybe just these two. I'm gonna take these two 14mm bolts out. Maybe that's all. I bet it's just these two 14mm holding it. Pull this heat shield off, then pull the wires off the solenoid, and then we got starter out. There's a little for the power to go into the solenoid. You got to pop this little clips here. You can see that. Pop this little clips off, and there's a 12mm nut in here. And then you got to take your signal wire off. And I can't even see it. It looks like 8mm on the other side. I can barely see it. So you pop this off, and then take your two 14mm bolts out there. Then we got the starter out of it. Denso starter. That thing there was no fun. I think if the guy signed the title and just gave me the thing, I'd probably tell him, no, I don't want it. Keep this thing. I think the only starter job that I ever did that was worse, I had a customer bring in a 98 Cadillac Eldorado with that North Star engine. And I finally found the starter. It was underneath the intake plenum in the valley. We had to take the whole intake manifold and everything, the throttle body, had to get the whole top of the motor to get the starter out. Yeah, it was in the valley. So, yeah, it was probably the only other one that was worse than this one. So, this wasn't too bad, really. I had about 2 hours, 2.5 hours in pulling it out. Alright, guys, well, got it all done. So, basically, you know, it's just basically reversal of disassembly. Put your starter back in. And then there's a heat shield on the starter with 3 bolts. Put that back in. Put your exhaust manifold on, put all your 12mm nuts on there, bolt your manifold in, and then you put your 3 bolts in on that heat shield that goes around the manifold, put that on, and pop your dipstick tube in. Then you can get underneath or raise it up if you're on a lift, and then you can put your exhaust back in, your plug your O2 sensors back in, and bolt your hold down bolt for your dipstick tube, and then you're pretty well ready to go. Hey, she starts now. So yeah, that was kind of a pain in the butt. I don't know, let's see here. I started had about 5 hours into it, so I don't know if that's good or bad. Probably guys that do them all the time probably go, ah, you suck, but I think I did alright for never doing it before. So alright, guys, so well, if you've never done one of those are the way to do these. Kind of a pain in the ass, but thanks for watching. See you next time.